The wind screamed across the Montana plains like a wild animal that night, shaking the walls of Daniel Brooks's lonely cabin as if it wanted to rip the roof right off. Snow slammed against the windows in heavy waves, turning the world outside into nothing but white darkness. Inside, the fire snapped and hissed while Daniel worked quietly at his table, mending a worn leather bridle with steady hands that had learned patience from years of surviving alone. He was 34 years old, broad-shouldered and strong from hard work, with a face shaped by wind and silence. 12 years on this land had taught him how to live with storms, hunger, and long stretches without another human voice. The cabin was simple but solid, built by his own hands from pine logs and stubborn determination. Well, it was the only thing in the world he trusted to stand firm against the wild Montana winters. A loud crack echoed outside, followed by the heavy crash of a fallen branch. Daniel froze, listening. His hand drifted toward the Winchester leaning against the wall. Living this far from town meant always being ready. Trouble rarely announced itself politely. Then he heard it. 3 weak knocks against the door. He frowned, thinking he imagined it. The wind howled again, but the sound came back. Soft, faint, desperate. No one should have been out in a storm like this. Daniel rose slowly, rifle in hand, and stepped toward the door. "Who's there?" he called, his deep voice rough from disuse. No answer came. Only another weak knock. He hesitated. Every instinct told him to be careful, but something about the sound unsettled him. He lifted the heavy wooden bar and cracked the door open. The wind exploded inside, throwing snow into the room. And there, swaying at the threshold, stood a woman. For a moment, Daniel forgot to breathe. Her dark hair hung in frozen strands around her face. Snow clung to her lashes. Her blue travel dress was stiff with ice, and she clutched a small carpet bag as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely alive. "Please help me." She collapsed before he could answer. Daniel dropped the rifle and caught her, shocked at how light she felt in his arms. He pulled her inside and kicked the door shut, shutting out the screaming storm. Her body trembled violently with cold. "Lord Almighty," he muttered, carrying her toward the fire. And he laid her gently on the rug by the hearth and added more logs, flames leaping higher. Her skin felt like ice. He knelt beside her, unsure what to do. He had tended wounded cattle and sick horses, but never a freezing woman pulled from a blizzard. Her eyes fluttered open for a moment. Green, bright even through exhaustion. Then they closed again. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" he asked. She nodded weakly. "You gotta get warm," he said quickly. He grabbed blankets from his bed and spread them over her. Her dress was soaked through, and he realized she would never warm up like this. He cleared his throat awkwardly. "Your dress, it's frozen. You need dry clothes. I'll turn around. There's a clean shirt there. Wrap yourself in the blankets. I won't look." She stared at him with fear and exhaustion mixing in her eyes, and then she gave the slightest nod. Daniel turned toward the wall, focusing hard on the rough wood, while he heard the rustle of wet fabric behind him. He counted knots in the logs to give her privacy. The wind pounded the walls outside, but inside the fire crackled steadily. "I'm decent," she said softly after a long moment. When he turned back, she was wrapped tightly in blankets, his flannel shirt visible at her collar. Color was slowly returning to her face, though her hands still shook. Daniel moved quickly, brewing strong coffee and spooning stew from the pot simmering on the stove. He handed her the cup carefully. "Easy," he said. "Drink slow." She took a sip and closed her eyes in relief. "Thank you," she whispered. "No, I thought I was going to die out there." "What were you doing in a storm like this?" he asked before he could stop himself. Tears filled her eyes, but she blinked them back. "I had nowhere else to go." He didn't press. "Eat first," he said gently. "Then you can tell me." She ate slowly, hands trembling less with each bite. Daniel noticed her soft hands, city hands, and the gold ring on her finger. When she finished, she stared into the fire. "My name is Clara," she said quietly. "Clara Whitmore." "Daniel Brooks," he replied. "This is my place." She nodded. "I came from Philadelphia. I was a mail-order bride." The words hung heavy in the air. Daniel knew the practice. Lonely ranchers ordering wives from back east. Some stories ended well. Others didn't. "I came to marry a rancher named Henry Callahan," she continued, but voice shaking. "He met me at the stage today, took one look at me and said I wasn't what he expected." Daniel's jaw tightened. "He left me at the crossroads," she said. "Told me to walk back to town. Then the snow came and I couldn't see the road." Silence filled the cabin, except for the fire. Daniel felt anger rising in his chest. Any man who'd leave a woman out there isn't worth the dust on his boots. She reached into her bag and pulled out a crumpled letter. "He gave me this." Daniel read it by firelight. Cold words. Businesslike. The agreement dissolved. $10 enclosed for her trouble. He crumpled the letter and tossed it into the flames without thinking. Clara watched it burn. "You can stay here tonight," Daniel said firmly. "Storm will pass by morning. I'll take you into town myself." She looked at him, exhausted but grateful. "Thank you. I won't forget your kindness." "Just being neighborly," he muttered, suddenly uncomfortable. Later, Daniel spread his bedroll on the floor by the fire while Clara slept in his bed. The storm raged outside, but inside the cabin felt different now. Less empty. He stared at the ceiling, listening to her soft breathing. Come morning, he told himself, he would take her to town. Help her find lodging. Do the proper thing. But as the wind howled and the fire cracked low, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed the moment she knocked on his door. He didn't know yet if it would bring trouble or salvation, only that life in his quiet cabin would never be the same again. Morning came slowly, pale sunlight pushing through frost-covered windows while the storm quieted outside. But Daniel woke stiff from sleeping on the floor, his back aching from the hard boards. The cabin felt warmer now, fuller somehow. He sat up and saw Clara already awake, wrapped in a blanket at his small table, both hands around a tin cup of coffee. She looked different in daylight, stronger. The fear from the night before still lingered in her eyes, but there was determination there too. Morning, Daniel said, rubbing his neck. She offered a faint smile. I hope you don't mind. I've already had 2 cups. Help yourself, he said, adding wood to the fire. Storm's easing. Should be able to take you to town later. Her fingers tightened around the cup. Before we go, there's more you should know. Daniel sat across from her, waiting quietly. I didn't come west because I was chasing a dream, she said softly. I came because I had nowhere else to go. She explained how her father's shipping business in Philadelphia collapsed after his death, how debt swallowed everything they owned, how her mother passed soon after, leaving Clara alone with nothing but bills and empty rooms. I tried to find work, she said, but respectable jobs for women don't pay enough to survive. My landlady showed me Henry Callahan's advertisement. She said ranchers needed wives, that I could start over. Daniel listened without interrupting. He promised me a home, she continued. A family, a place to belong. Her voice cracked. When he saw me, he said I wasn't what he ordered, like I was livestock. Daniel's hands curled into fists under the table. He left me at the crossroads, she whispered. If I hadn't seen your light. She didn't finish. Silence stretched between them. What will you do now? Daniel asked gently. I don't know, she admitted. I have $10 and a suitcase. That's all. You could find work in town, he said, though he knew how thin that hope sounded. She gave him a sad smile. You know as well as I do what kind of work desperate women end up with in frontier towns. Daniel looked away, ashamed because she was right. The wind outside picked up again, snow swirling thick. By midday, the storm returned stronger than before, burying the cabin under fresh drifts. Travel became impossible. Looks like you're stuck here a bit longer, Daniel said. Clara nodded. I promise I won't be a burden. You're not. And slowly, without meaning to, they fell into a rhythm. Clara cooked while Daniel cared for the animals. She learned how to bank the fire properly. He found himself smiling when he stepped inside and smelled coffee waiting on the stove. Evenings were spent talking by firelight. She told him stories of crowded streets and city life. He shared stories of cattle drives and lonely winters. You really built this place yourself? She asked one night, running her fingers along the table edge. Every board, he said. Took 2 years. It feels like a home, she said quietly, not just a cabin. The words warmed him more than the fire. By the 3rd day, Daniel realized he was looking forward to her laughter. The cabin, once silent, now felt alive. On the 4th morning, as the storm finally eased, snow glittered under a clear sky, endless white stretching across the valley. They stood by the window watching the sunrise. It's beautiful, Clara whispered. Wait until spring, Daniel said. Whole place turns green. She smiled softly. I wish I could see that. The words settled between them like something fragile. Their hands brushed accidentally when she turned. Daniel caught her arm to steady her, and suddenly they were standing close enough to hear each other breathe. Neither moved. Then she stepped back, cheeks flushed. I should make breakfast, she said quickly. Something had changed. Something neither of them knew how to name. That evening they sat quietly by the fire. The air felt charged. My parents said they knew they loved each other right away, Clara said suddenly. Daniel glanced at her. Sounds fast. Mother said when you know, you know. She looked down. I used to think that was foolish. And now? She hesitated. Now I'm not so sure. Daniel's heart pounded. He stood abruptly. I'll check on the animals. Outside, the cold air hit him hard. He walked to the barn, trying to clear his head. He barely knew her. She was stranded and vulnerable. Any feelings between them had to be temporary. Circumstance, nothing more. But when he returned, she had left a warm plate of food waiting for him. Thank you, he said softly. She looked up from her journal. You've shown me more kindness in a few days than some people show in a lifetime. He swallowed hard. You don't owe me anything. That's not what this is, she said. He stared at her, realizing he was already lost. The next morning, and the sound of horses shattered the quiet. Daniel stepped outside and froze. Henry Callahan rode toward the cabin with Sheriff Thompson beside him and another ranch hand trailing behind. Clara, Daniel said sharply, stay inside. But she appeared behind him anyway, face pale. Callahan stopped his horse 20 feet away. Brooks, he called. I hear you're harboring my bride. Daniel's jaw tightened. Don't see any property of yours here, Callahan sneered. I paid for her passage. She belongs to me. Clara stepped forward, voice firm despite trembling hands. I belong to no one. Callahan's expression darkened. You owe me. Daniel moved in front of her. You left her to freeze. Sheriff Thompson cleared his throat. Let's settle this calm. Clara handed the sheriff the letter Callahan had given her, and the sheriff read silently, eyebrows rising. Seems pretty clear, he said. You dissolved the agreement. Callahan cursed under his breath. I changed my mind. You don't get to change your mind after abandoning someone, Daniel said coldly. Tension cracked in the air like lightning. Callahan's hand drifted near his gun. Daniel stepped forward, voice low and deadly. Touch her, and you won't leave this land walking. For a long moment, no one moved. Finally, the sheriff spoke firmly. Henry, ride out. This ain't your fight anymore. Callahan glared at Clara. You'll regret this, he spat, before turning his horse sharply and riding off. When they were gone, Clara sat down heavily on the porch steps, shaking. I'm sorry, she whispered. I brought trouble to you. You didn't bring anything, Daniel said, sitting beside her. He did. She looked up at him, eyes bright with tears. What happens now? Daniel hesitated. The truth pressed against his chest. I don't want you to leave, he admitted quietly. Her breath caught. But I got no right to ask you to stay, he added. You deserve better than this place, better than me. Clara stepped closer, voice soft. Better than a man who saved my life? Who stands up for me when no one else would? He looked at her, really looked at her. I love you, he said suddenly, the words rough and honest. Since the first night you stood at my door. Tears slipped down her cheeks. I choose to stay, she whispered. She reached up and kissed him gently. The world seemed to hold its breath. From a distant ridge, hidden among the trees, Henry Callahan watched through narrowed eyes, rage burning deep inside him. But Daniel and Clara noticed nothing except each other. They had no idea the real fight was just beginning. Word spread through the valley faster than wildfire. By the end of the week, everyone knew about the mail-order bride who had chosen a poor cowboy over a wealthy rancher. Some people whispered behind closed doors. Others watched openly when Daniel rode into town. Conversation stopped when he entered the store, and Clara felt the weight of curious eyes every time she stepped onto the street. But not everyone turned against them. Dr. Morrison and his wife visited first, bringing kindness instead of judgment. The Garretts stopped by with food and laughter. Slowly, small signs appeared that they were not alone. Still, the gossip hurt. Clara heard women whisper words like scandal and shame, and it stung deeper than she wanted to admit. One evening she returned from town pale and quiet. Daniel found her packing her small bag. What happened? He asked, fear tightening his chest. Mrs. Aldrich said I was ruining your life, Clara said softly. She said women like me end up in the saloon. Her voice cracked. Maybe she's right. Maybe I should leave before I destroy everything you've built. Daniel crossed the room in 2 steps and took her hands. You're not leaving. Daniel, I don't care what they say, he said firmly. I care about you. She looked up at him, tears shining in her eyes. And what are we, Daniel? 2 people hiding from the world? He hesitated only a moment. We're in love, he said quietly. At least I am. A trembling smile touched her lips. Oh, then we should stop hiding. The decision came naturally after that. They would marry, not because the town demanded it, not because of gossip, but because they wanted to build a life together. 2 weeks later, on a bright Montana morning, neighbors gathered under the cottonwood tree beside the cabin. Clara wore a simple cream dress borrowed and altered by the women who had chosen to stand beside her. Wildflowers rested in her dark hair. Daniel waited nervously, dressed in his best shirt, hands shaking more than he cared to admit. When she walked toward him, everything else faded away. Reverend Hartley spoke the words while sunlight filtered through the branches overhead. Their vows were simple and honest. Daniel slipped his mother's gold ring onto Clara's finger. "I choose you," he said, voice rough with emotion. "And I choose you," she whispered back. When they kissed, cheers erupted around them. Laughter filled the yard, and for the first time Clara truly felt she belonged. Yet even on that happy day, trouble lingered. High on a distant ridge, Henry Callahan watched silently before turning his horse and riding away, his anger still alive. Life settled after that. The cabin that once held only silence filled with warmth and shared routines. Clara learned to work the land beside Daniel. He returned from long days in the field to find supper waiting and laughter at the table. They talked late into the night about dreams they never dared speak before. Slowly, the town softened. People who once whispered began to greet Clara by name. She joined community gatherings, and the women who once judged her started asking for her help with sewing and cooking. Kindness grew where suspicion had once lived. Still, Callahan was not finished. One morning, a letter arrived claiming Clara's father was dying back east and begging her to return. But Clara's father had been dead for years. The lie was obvious. Daniel's jaw tightened as he read it. "He's trying to trick you." They went to town and confronted Callahan publicly. Sheriff Thompson and Reverend Hartley stood beside them as the truth came out. But Callahan's forged story collapsed in front of the crowd. For the first time, the town saw him for what he was. Humiliated, he rode away. And something shifted that day. The whispers quieted. People started looking at Daniel and Clara not as a scandal, but as a couple who had fought for love and honesty. The years passed. The cabin grew. A second room was added when their daughter Emma was born. 2 years later came little James, loud and full of life. The house filled with toys, laughter, muddy footprints, and the kind of chaos Daniel never imagined he would welcome. Clara became part of the community. She helped organize a small schoolhouse for the growing number of children in the valley. Daniel watched her teaching and realized the frightened woman who once arrived at his door had become strong, confident, and full of purpose. But one summer evening, 5 years after the storm that changed everything, Tom Garrett arrived with news. "Callahan's back," he said. The name brought back old memories, but when Henry finally appeared, he looked like a different man. Older, tired, desperate. "I want to buy your land," he said bluntly, offering more money than Daniel had ever seen. "It's not for sale," Daniel replied. Callahan turned to Clara. "You could have had everything with me." She met his gaze calmly. "I already do." The words hit harder than any argument. For a long moment, Callahan stared at the family standing before him. Daniel steady and strong, Clara confident, children playing nearby, and something in him seemed to break. Without another word, he turned and rode away. They never saw him again. That night, after friends left and the children were asleep, Clara and Daniel sat together on the porch beneath a sky full of stars. The same porch where they had once wondered what the future held. "Any regrets?" Daniel asked softly. Clara smiled, leaning against his shoulder. She thought of the storm, the fear, the loneliness that had once filled her life. Then she thought of the laughter inside the cabin, the family they had built. the love that had grown from one simple act of kindness. "Not a single one," she said. A soft cry came from inside the house. Their son had woken from a dream. Clara stood, brushing her dress. "I'll get him," she said. Daniel caught her hand for a moment, squeezing gently before letting go. He watched her disappear inside the warm light of their home and felt a deep, quiet gratitude. 5 years ago, he had opened his door to a stranger in a storm and found the love that would last a lifetime. Outside, the wind moved softly through the trees, no longer a threat, but a familiar song. Inside, laughter and lullabies filled the cabin, proof that sometimes the greatest blessings arrive when you least expect them. And in the heart of the Montana frontier, two lonely souls, who once thought they were broken, had built something stronger than any storm: a home, a family, and a love that would never be abandoned again.